3 years of trust, one glance down the aisle, and Simone's heart exploded. Her husband standing with her sister. Why now, why her? Welcome back, my amazing family and friends. If you're ready to dive into this unforgettable story, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Tomorrow, I'll bring you another incredible tale you absolutely can't miss. Let's get started, and don't forget to like and share to help our community grow. The invitation had arrived on a Tuesday. Simone remembered because Tuesdays were her therapy days, the one morning each week she allowed herself to sit in Dr. Patterson's office and pretend she was making progress. The cream-colored envelope had been wedged between a water bill and a promotional flyer for a new Mediterranean restaurant on Columbus Avenue, its elegant calligraphy almost apologetic in its formality. Ms. Simone Clark, you are cordially invited to celebrate the union of Naomi Clark and Theodore James Whitmore III. Her hands had trembled as she read the names, black ink swimming before her eyes until the letters became meaningless shapes. Theodore. Theo. The man who had ghosted her 3 years ago, disappearing without explanation after 18 months of what she'd believed was love. The man whose absence had carved a hollow space in her chest that still ached on cold nights. And Naomi. Her twin sister. Her other half, the person who'd shared a womb with her, who'd finished her sentences and defended her against schoolyard bullies and held her hand through their mother's funeral. Simone had stood in her small Brooklyn apartment, the one-bedroom walk-up with a leaky faucet and the view of a brick wall, and laughed. It was a harsh, brittle sound that startled her cat, Duchess, from her perch on the windowsill. Then the laughter had dissolved into something rawer, and she'd sunk onto her worn sofa, the invitation crumpling in her fist. 3 years. 3 years of silence from Theo, of unanswered texts and blocked numbers. 3 years of rebuilding herself, of learning to sleep without dreaming of his hands in her hair, his voice murmuring promises against her skin. 3 years of watching Naomi ascend in their father's real estate empire while Simone taught middle school English in the Bronx, grading papers until midnight and subsisting on instant ramen. The invitation didn't mention how they'd met. It didn't need to. Now, 6 weeks later, Simone stood in the vestibule of St. Patrick's Cathedral, her reflection fractured in the ornate mirror hanging beside the entrance. She'd chosen a simple navy dress, elegant but understated, not the bridesmaid's gown she'd once imagined wearing at her twin's wedding. Her natural hair was twisted into an intricate updo, tiny crystal pins catching the light. She looked composed, professional, like a woman who had her life together. She looked nothing like the broken girl who'd cried herself to sleep for 6 months after Theo vanished. Simone. The voice made her spine stiffen. She turned to find her father, Howard Clark, approaching with his characteristic measured stride. At 63, he was still imposing, broad-shouldered and silver-haired, with a kind of presence that commanded boardrooms and silenced dissent. His tuxedo was impeccably tailored, probably custom-made on Savile Row. Dad. She kept her voice neutral, professional, the same tone she used with difficult parents during parent-teacher conferences. You came. He seemed genuinely surprised, his dark eyes, so like her own, searching her face. Naomi wasn't sure you would. She invited me. Simone managed a tight smile. It would be rude not to attend my own sister's wedding. Howard's jaw tightened. They'd had this conversation before, in fragments and half-finished arguments over the past 6 weeks. He tried to explain, to justify, to smooth over the jagged edges of betrayal with platitudes about love being unpredictable and family being forever. Simone, I know this is difficult. Do you? The words escaped before she could stop them, sharp enough to make a passing usher glance their way. She lowered her voice. Do you know what it's like to lose someone you loved, only to discover they've been with your sister for God knows how long? To wonder if they were together while he was still with me. Naomi swears they only reconnected a year ago. Howard's voice carried the weight of a man trying to believe his own daughter. She said she ran into him at a charity gala, that they started talking. And you believe her? It wasn't a question. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken truths. Howard Clark had always favored Naomi, though he'd deny it if confronted. She was the daughter who'd followed him into real estate, who'd earned her MBA from Wharton, who'd closed multi-million-dollar deals before turning 30. Simone had chosen passion over profit, education over empire building, and Howard had never quite forgiven her for it. I believe, Howard said carefully, that love is complicated, and that holding on to anger will only hurt you in the end. That's convenient advice when you're not the one being hurt. Before Howard could respond, the chapel doors opened, releasing a wave of classical music and the murmur of seated guests. The wedding coordinator, a severe woman in all black, appeared, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Clark, we need you. The ceremony starts in 5 minutes." Howard hesitated, his hand half reaching for Simone's arm. Then he nodded and followed the coordinator inside, leaving Simone alone in the vestibule. She should leave. The rational part of her brain, the part that had gotten her through graduate school and into a teaching position at a decent school, screamed at her to turn around, to walk out of St. Patrick's Cathedral and never look back. She could Uber home, order Thai food, binge-watch something mindless on Netflix, and pretend this day never happened. But she couldn't move. Because beneath the anger and the hurt, beneath the 3 years of carefully constructed indifference, lived a terrible need to understand. To see them together. To know if what Theo had found with Naomi was worth destroying what he'd had with Simone. The music swelled, Pachelbel's canon, predictably, and Simone found herself walking toward the chapel doors. An usher materialized, young and nervous in his rented tuxedo. "Bride or groom?" he asked. The question felt absurd. She was neither and both, connected to this wedding by blood and betrayal. "Bride," she whispered. He led her down the side aisle, away from the main procession route. The cathedral was spectacular, soaring Gothic arches, stained glass windows casting jeweled light across rows of white roses and hydrangeas. The guest list read like a who's who of New York's elite: real estate moguls, finance executives, society matrons in designer gowns and statement jewelry. Simone recognized several faces from her father's annual holiday parties, events she'd stopped attending after her mother died. These were Naomi's people now, the circle she moved in with effortless grace. The usher deposited her in a pew near the back, on the bride's side but far enough from the family section to be forgettable. Simone slid into the seat, her hands folded in her lap, and waited. The processional began. Bridesmaids glided down the aisle in champagne-colored silk, Naomi sorority sisters and college friends, women Simone barely knew despite sharing DNA with the bride. Then the flower girl, a cherubic blonde who scattered petals with serious concentration. The music changed. "Here Comes the Bride" filled the cathedral, and everyone stood. Simone's heart hammered against her ribs. She told herself to breathe, to maintain composure, to remember that she was a 32-year-old woman who'd survived loss and rebuilding and would survive this too. Then Naomi appeared at the end of the aisle. She was breathtaking. The gown was a masterpiece of lace and silk, fitted through the bodice and cascading into a dramatic train that seemed to float rather than drag. Her hair, the same tight coils as Simone's, but chemically straightened into glossy waves, was crowned with a delicate tiara. Her makeup was flawless, highlighting the high cheekbones and full lips they both inherited from their mother. But it was her smile that made Simone's chest constrict. Naomi was radiant, glowing with a happiness so pure it seemed to illuminate the entire cathedral. This wasn't the calculated charm she used in boardrooms or the practiced poise she displayed at charity events. This was joy, unfiltered and real. Howard walked beside her, his arm linked through hers, pride evident in every step. They moved in sync, father and daughter, toward the altar where the groom waited. Where Theo waited. Simone's vision tunneled. The guests, the flowers, the soaring architecture, everything faded except the man standing at the altar in a perfectly cut tuxedo. Theodore James Whitmore III hadn't changed. He was still tall and lean, with a kind of casual elegance that came from generations of old money. His light brown hair was slightly longer than she remembered, swept back from a face that belonged in a Ralph Lauren ad, strong jaw, straight nose, those penetrating blue eyes that had once looked at her like she was the only woman in the world. He watched Naomi approach with an expression Simone recognized intimately. Awe. Devotion. Love. The same expression he'd worn when he'd proposed to Simone 3 years ago, kneeling in her tiny apartment with a ring he'd probably spent months saving for. The same expression that had been on his face the last time she'd seen him, the morning he'd kissed her goodbye and promised to be back that evening for their anniversary dinner. He'd never come back. Never called. Never explained. And now he was marrying her sister. Howard handed Naomi off to Theo, their fingers intertwining as the officiant began the ceremony. Simone watched, frozen, as they exchanged vows she couldn't quite hear over the roaring in her ears. She watched as Theo lifted the veil, his hands gentle, reverent. She watched as he kissed Naomi, sealing promises that should have been made to someone else. The cathedral erupted in applause. Simone's hands moved mechanically, clapping along with everyone else, a marionette going through the motions of celebration. And then, as if sensing her presence, as if the weight of her gaze was physical, Naomi turned. The bride turned around, her face flushed with happiness, ready to process back down the aisle with her new husband. Her eyes swept the crowd, acknowledging the smiling faces, the raised phones capturing the moment. Then she found Simone. Their gazes locked across the rows of guests, across years of shared history and recent silence. Simone saw the exact moment recognition hit, the way Naomi's smile faltered, how her grip on Theo's arm tightened. And beside her, drawn by her sudden tension, Theo followed her line of sight. His face went white. Absolutely bloodless, as if he'd seen a ghost. Which, Simone supposed, he had. She'd been dead to him for 3 years. Easier to forget someone you disappeared on if you could pretend they'd simply ceased to exist. But she hadn't ceased to exist. She'd survived. And now she was here, bearing witness to the life he'd built on the ruins of what they'd had. The moment stretched, elastic and terrible. The three of them trapped in a tableau of recognition and regret, while hundreds of oblivious guests continued to applaud and the photographer snapped away, capturing what would look like a perfect wedding day. Naomi moved first, turning back toward the aisle, her cathedral train swishing behind her as she and Theo began their recessional. But as they passed Simone's pew, Naomi's eyes found her again, and this time, there was something beyond guilt in her sister's expression. There was fear. The reception was held at the plaza, because of course it was. Simone had debated skipping it entirely. She'd fulfilled her obligation by attending the ceremony, had borne witness to the union that never should have happened. She could slip away now, take the subway back to Brooklyn, and spend the rest of the evening pretending this day had been nothing more than a fever dream. But something kept her rooted in place as the guests filed out of St. Patrick's, chattering about how beautiful the bride looked, how handsome the couple was, how romantic the whole affair had been. Something bitter and unfinished coiled in her stomach, demanding resolution. Or maybe just demanding blood. She followed the crowd to the plaza, letting herself be swept along in a tide of designer gowns and expensive cologne. The grand ballroom had been transformed into something from a fairy tale, crystal chandeliers dripping light, white roses climbing every column, tables draped in champagne silk and set with china that probably cost more than Simone's monthly rent. Place cards directed guests to their assigned seats. Simone found hers at table 17, tucked in the back corner near the kitchen doors. A mercy, really. She'd be able to observe without being observed, to eat her overpriced chicken and slip out before the speeches began. She shared the table with distant cousins she barely recognized and a few of Naomi's college acquaintances who introduced themselves with the vacant politeness of people fulfilling social obligations. No one asked how she knew the bride. No one seemed to care. Simone accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and tried to ignore the way her hands trembled slightly as she lifted it to her lips. The ballroom filled gradually, a sea of tuxedos and evening gowns flowing toward their designated tables. A string quartet played softly in the corner, something classical and unobtrusive, the kind of music that announced wealth without being gauche about it. Then the DJ's voice boomed through the speakers, "Ladies and gentlemen, for the first time as husband and wife, please welcome Mr. and Mrs. Theodore Whitmore." The doors at the far end of the ballroom opened, and Theo and Naomi swept in, their hands clasped and raised in triumph. The guests erupted in applause and cheers. Someone started clinking their glass with a fork, and soon the entire room joined in, the crystalline sound demanding the couple kiss. They obliged. Theo dipped Naomi dramatically, his hand cradling the back of her head, and the guests ate it up, whistling, stomping, celebrating this picture-perfect love story. Simone took another long drink of champagne. The newlyweds made their way to the head table, positioned on a raised platform that ensured everyone in the room could see them. Howard sat to Naomi's left, beaming with patriarchal pride. Theo's parents occupied the seats to his right, a distinguished couple Simone had never met, though she'd heard about them during her relationship with Theo. Old Connecticut money, a family tree that traced back to the Mayflower, the kind of pedigree that opened doors and closed ranks against outsiders. Like a middle school English teacher from Brooklyn whose father had only recently clawed his way into the real estate elite. The first course arrived, some kind of deconstructed salad that was more art than food. Simone pushed it around her plate, making a show of eating while her stomach churned. Around her, conversations flowed about stock portfolios and vacation homes, about which private schools had the best college placement rates and whether the Hamptons were becoming too crowded. She felt invisible. A ghost at the feast. Then, Between the salad and the main course, Naomi stood. The room quieted immediately, all attention shifting to the bride. She looked even more radiant under the chandelier light, her skin glowing against the white of her gown, her straightened hair cascading over one shoulder. "I know we have toast scheduled for later," Naomi said, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who'd pitched to boardrooms full of skeptical investors. "But I couldn't wait. There are so many people here who've supported Theo and me, who've helped make this day possible." She gestured to their parents, to the wedding party, her smile never faltering. Then her eyes scanned the room, moving systematically across the tables, acknowledging guests with little nods and waves. Simone felt it coming before it happened. Felt the inevitability of it, like watching a car crash in slow motion. Naomi's gaze found her. "And I especially want to acknowledge my sister," Naomi said, her voice catching slightly. "Simone, thank you for being here. It means more than you know." Every head in the ballroom turned. Simone felt hundreds of eyes land on her, felt the weight of their curiosity and speculation. Heat crept up her neck, into her cheeks. She managed a tight nod, her hand gripping the champagne flute so hard she was surprised it didn't shatter. Naomi continued speaking, moving on to thank the wedding planner and the florist, but the damage was done. Simone's tablemates were looking at her with new interest, whispering to each other behind raised hands. She caught fragments, "That's the sister. And I heard there was drama and must be awkward." The main course arrived. Filet mignon, perfectly cooked, with some kind of reduction sauce and roasted vegetables arranged like a still life. Simone cut into it mechanically, chewing without tasting, washing it down with more champagne. She'd lost count of how many glasses she'd had. Enough that the edges of the room had gone soft, that the conversation around her had faded to a distant hum. Enough that when dessert was cleared and the DJ announced it was time for the first dance, she didn't immediately register what was happening. Theo and Naomi took to the dance floor. The opening notes of their chosen song filled the ballroom, something modern and romantic that Simone didn't recognize. They moved together with the ease of people who'd practiced, who'd taken lessons to ensure this moment would be perfect. Theo's hand rested on the small of Naomi's back, just above where the dress dipped to reveal smooth skin. Naomi's arms draped around his neck, her head tilted back to look up at him, and he was smiling down at her with such open adoration that Simone had to look away. But not before she saw something that made her breath catch. The ring on Naomi's finger, the engagement ring that sparkled under the chandelier light, was the same one Theo had given Simone 3 years ago. The same emerald-cut diamond in a platinum setting. The same delicate band that Simone had worn for exactly 12 hours before Theo vanished, taking the ring with him when he'd never returned to her apartment. She'd assumed he'd returned it, gotten his money back, erased that chapter of his life. But no. He'd kept it. Saved it. Given it to her sister. The champagne turned to acid in Simone's stomach. She pushed back from the table abruptly, ignoring the startled looks from her tablemates, and headed for the exit. She needed air. Needed space. Needed to be anywhere but in this ballroom watching her sister dance with the man who'd proposed to Simone with that exact ring. The hallway outside the grand ballroom was blessedly empty and quiet. Simone leaned against the wall, pressing her palms against the cool surface, trying to regulate her breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The technique Dr. Patterson had taught her for managing panic attacks. "Simone." The voice came from behind her. Low, rough, painfully familiar. She turned slowly, knowing what she'd find but still somehow unprepared for the reality of it. Theo stood in the hallway, still in his tuxedo, his bow tie slightly loosened. Up close, she could see the subtle changes 3 years had wrought, fine lines at the corners of his eyes, a hint of grey at his temples. But he was still fundamentally Theo, still the man who told her she was the love of his life while they lay tangled in her bed sheets on a Sunday morning. "You shouldn't be here," Simone said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Your wife will wonder where you've gone." He flinched at the word wife. "I saw you leave. I wanted to explain." "Explain what, exactly?" The champagne had burned away some of her filters, loosened the tight control she'd maintained all day. "How you proposed to me and then disappeared. How you ghosted me for 3 years and then showed up engaged to my twin sister. Which part needs explaining, Theo?" "All of it." He took a step closer, and she caught the scent of his cologne, something expensive and woody that she'd once found comforting. Now it just made her nauseous. "Simone, if I could go back and do things differently." "But you can't." She cut him off, her laugh sharp and humorless. That's the thing about time, isn't it? It only moves forward. And you moved forward straight into Naomi's bed. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? She was advancing on him now, years of suppressed anger finally finding its voice. Tell me. I'm dying to know. Did you cheat on me with her while we were together? Or did you just decide one day that the other Clark's sister was a better investment? Better connections, better pedigree, better bank account. Stop it. His voice was harsh now, defensive. You don't know what you're talking about. Then enlighten me. She was almost shouting now, past caring if anyone heard. Because from where I'm standing, you're a coward who couldn't even break up with me properly. Who took the engagement ring I wore for one night and gave it to my sister. You couldn't even buy her a new ring, Theo? That's how little I meant to you. His face drained of color. You saw. Of course I saw. Tears were burning her eyes now, hot and furious. She blinked them back violently. She would not cry. Not here, not in front of him. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? Or did you just not care? Simone. Mr. Whitmore. They both turned to find a hotel staff member hovering nervously at the entrance to the ballroom. Sir, they're about to cut the cake. Your bride is looking for you. Of course she was. Because this was Naomi's day, Naomi's moment, Naomi's triumph. And Theo belonged to her now, bound by vows and legal documents and a ring that Simone had once believed was meant for her forever. Theo looked between Simone and the staff member, clearly torn. Then he did what he always did. He took the path of least resistance. I'll be right there, he told the staff member. Then, to Simone, we need to talk. Properly. After the reception, I can. No. The word came out flat, final. We don't need to do anything. You made your choice 3 years ago. You made it again when you proposed to Naomi. Live with it. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the marble floor. She half expected him to follow, to call after her, but he didn't. Of course he didn't. Theo had never been good at confrontation, at difficult conversations. It was why he'd ghosted her instead of breaking up properly in the first place. Simone made it to the ladies' room before the tears came. She locked herself in a stall and let them fall silently, her shoulders shaking with the force of 3 years' worth of grief and rage and betrayal finally finding release. When she'd cried herself empty, she emerged, fixing her makeup with shaking hands. Her reflection in the ornate mirror looked haunted, eyes red-rimmed despite her best efforts with concealer, lips pressed into a thin line that couldn't quite hide their trembling. She should leave. Should call an Uber and go home and never speak to any of them again. But something had shifted in that hallway confrontation. Some dam had broken, releasing a flood of emotions she'd kept carefully contained for so long. And beneath the pain lived something else, something sharp-edged and determined. She deserved answers. Real ones, not whatever half-truth Theo had been about to feed her before he was summoned back to his bride. Simone took a deep breath, smoothed down her dress, and walked back into the ballroom. The cake cutting was underway, a towering confection of white fondant and sugar flowers. Theo and Naomi posed with a knife, their hands overlapping on the handle, while the photographer snapped away. They fed each other bites of cake, laughing when frosting smudged on Theo's nose, and the guests applauded as if they'd done something remarkable. Simone reclaimed her seat at table 17 and watched. Really watched this time, looking for cracks in the perfect facade. And she found them. The way Naomi's smile dimmed slightly when she thought no one was looking. The way her eyes kept drifting toward the exit where Theo had disappeared, where he'd gone to find Simone. The way she touched her engagement ring compulsively, spinning it around her finger. Naomi knew. She'd always known. The toasts began. Theo's best man told amusing stories about their college days, carefully edited for the mixed audience. One of Naomi's bridesmaids gushed about how perfect they were together, how everyone who knew them could see they were soulmates. Then Howard stood, glass raised, and the ballroom fell silent. My daughter Naomi has always been exceptional, he began, his voice carrying the practiced authority of countless boardroom presentations. From the moment she was born, 3 minutes before her sister, she was a fighter. Determined, brilliant, unstoppable. Simone felt the knife twist. Always Naomi. Never both of them, never the twins together. Just Naomi, the golden child, the success story. When she told me she'd reconnected with an old friend and fallen in love, Howard continued, I'll admit I had my concerns. The situation was complicated. His eyes flickered briefly toward Simone before returning to Naomi. But seeing them together, seeing how happy she is, I know this is right. Theodore, you're getting the best woman I know. Take care of her. They clinked glasses, drank, applauded. And through it all, Naomi kept glancing toward the back of the ballroom, where Simone sat in shadows and judgment. The reception continued, dancing, mingling, the gradual exodus of older guests as the night stretched toward midnight. The DJ played Motown and top 40 hits, and the dance floor filled with tipsy guests showing off moves that would be embarrassing in the harsh light of sobriety. Simone stayed. Drinking water now, the champagne buzz fading into a dull headache. Watching. Waiting. What would you do if you were in Simone's position? Confront them together or walk away with your dignity intact? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Around 11:30, Naomi disappeared. Simone saw her excuse herself from a conversation with some of Theo's relatives, saw her head toward a service corridor that led away from the main ballroom. Without thinking, or perhaps thinking too clearly, Simone followed. The corridor was narrow and utilitarian, designed for staff to move unseen behind the opulent facade. Simone's heels echoed on the linoleum floor as she tracked Naomi's white train disappearing around a corner. She found her sister in a small alcove, sitting on a storage crate, her head in her hands. The elaborate updo was starting to come loose, pins sliding free. She looked exhausted. Human. Naomi. Her sister's head snapped up, eyes wide with something that looked like panic. Simone. What are you? You knew. Simone cut through whatever excuse Naomi was preparing. When you reconnected with Theo, you knew he'd been with me. You knew he'd proposed to me. Naomi's mouth opened. Closed. She looked younger suddenly, vulnerable in a way Simone hadn't seen since they were children. Yes, she finally whispered. I knew. The admission hung between them, stark and unvarnished. How long? Simone asked. Her voice was steady now, past anger into something colder. How long were you together while he was still with me? We weren't. Naomi stopped, seeming to reconsider. I ran into him about 2 months after you two ended. At a charity auction. We started talking, and he told me everything. Everything. Simone laughed bitterly. Funny, because he never told me anything. Never explained why he disappeared. Never gave me the courtesy of a real ending. Naomi stood, her wedding dress rustling. Even now, even here, she looked elegant. In control. He was ashamed, Simone, of what he'd done, of how he'd handled things. So he ran to you. The words came out sharper than Simone intended. He broke my heart and ran straight into your arms, and you just, what? Comforted him? Told him it wasn't his fault. It wasn't that simple. Then make it simple for me. Simone was advancing now, closing the distance between them. Make me understand how my sister, my twin, the person who's supposed to know me better than anyone, could fall in love with the man who destroyed me. Tears were sliding down Naomi's cheeks now, cutting tracks through her professionally applied makeup. Because I loved him first, she said, her voice breaking. I loved him before you ever met him. The world tilted. What? The summer after college. Naomi was crying harder now, words tumbling out in a rush. We met at an internship networking event. Started dating. It was casual at first, but then it got serious, and I thought maybe he was the one. But Dad was pushing me so hard to focus on the business, to prove myself, and Theo wanted more time together than I could give. So we broke up. Mutual, amicable. Or so I thought. Simone's mind was racing, trying to reconcile this new information with everything she'd believed. That was 9 years ago. I didn't meet Theo until 6 years ago. I know. Naomi wiped at her eyes with trembling fingers. I introduced you. At my birthday party, remember? He was there with some mutual friends, and you two just clicked. And I thought I was over him. I thought it didn't matter anymore. So I encouraged it. I told you he was a good guy, that you should give him a chance. The memory surfaced, Naomi's 30th birthday celebration at some trendy Tribeca restaurant. Simone, recently heartbroken from a failed relationship, drowning her sorrows in expensive cocktails Naomi's friends were buying. And Theo, charming and attentive, making her laugh for the first time in months. "You set us up," Simone said slowly. "I thought I was doing a good thing." Naomi's voice was pleading now. "You seemed so happy together. And I was focused on work, building my career. I didn't have time for relationships. So I buried whatever I still felt for him and told myself I was being mature, being a good sister. But you weren't over him." "No." The word was barely a whisper. "I wasn't. And when he proposed to you, when you called me crying happy tears because he'd gotten down on one knee in your apartment, I realized I'd made a terrible mistake. That I still loved him. That I'd always loved him." The pieces were falling into place now, forming a picture Simone hadn't wanted to see. "You're why he left." Naomi nodded miserably. "He came to see me. The night before your anniversary. Said he needed to talk, that he'd been feeling confused. We met for coffee, and everything just came out. All these old feelings we'd both been suppressing. We kissed. Just once, but it was enough to make him realize he couldn't go through with marrying you. So he just disappeared." Simone's voice was hollow. "Instead of being honest with me, instead of having a difficult conversation, he ghosted me and ran back to you." "He didn't run back to me." Naomi was shaking her head. "He took the ring back and cut contact with both of us. Said he needed time to figure out what he wanted, who he was. I didn't hear from him for almost 2 years. And then I ran into him at that auction. And he was different. More mature. He'd been in therapy, working through his issues. And we started over. Slowly, carefully, building something real. On the ruins of what he had with me. I know how it looks." Naomi took a step forward, reaching for Simone's hands. Simone jerked away. "I know I should have told you. Should have said something before it got this serious. But I was afraid. Afraid of losing him again. Afraid of hurting you. Afraid of Dad's reaction." Dad knew. Another betrayal, stacking like cards in a house that was about to collapse. Not until we got engaged. And he was furious at first. Threatened to cut me off. Said I was betraying you. But Theo and we convinced him that what we have is real. That we deserve a chance at happiness. And what I deserved. Simone's voice was rising now, echoing off the narrow walls. "What about my happiness, Naomi? Did that factor into your calculations at all?" "Of course it did." Naomi was crying openly now, mascara running. "Simone, you're my sister. I love you. But I also love him, and I can't help that. I can't turn it off just because it's inconvenient or complicated or morally wrong." Simone supplied. "Or fundamentally selfish. Or a complete betrayal of the person who shared a womb with you." "I'm sorry." Naomi's voice cracked. "I'm so sorry. But I'm also not sorry, because he makes me happy. Because I love him in a way I've never loved anyone else. And I know that makes me a terrible person, a terrible sister, but it's the truth. The truth." After 3 years of silence and speculation, of questions that had no answers, here was the truth. And it was somehow worse than anything Simone had imagined. "That ring," Simone said quietly. "The engagement ring you're wearing. He gave me that ring when he proposed." Naomi looked down at her hand, at the diamond catching light from the flickering fluorescent bulb above them. "I know. He told me. Said he kept it because it was the first time he'd ever wanted to propose to someone, and he couldn't bring himself to return it. When he proposed to me, he asked if I wanted him to buy a new one. But I..." She trailed off, seeming to realize how terrible the next words would sound. "But you wanted to erase me," Simone finished. "You wanted to wear the ring that was meant for me, to claim that moment as yours instead." "No." But Naomi's voice lacked conviction. "I just thought. It felt like a second chance. For both of us. A way to honor what he felt, even if the person changed. Except I'm not just any person." Simone's voice was steel now. "I'm your sister. Your twin. We shared everything growing up. Clothes, friends, secrets. But apparently there's one thing we can't share. Simone, please. Does he love you?" The question surprised them both. "Really love you? I mean..." Not just the idea of you, or what you represent. But you, your flaws, your ambitions, your 3 a.m. anxieties. The way he loved me. Naomi's face crumpled. I think so. I hope so. But honestly, I don't know. And that terrifies me, because what if you're right? What if he just replaced you with someone who looks like you but has a better pedigree? What if I'm just the acceptable version of what he really wanted? It was the first truly honest thing Naomi had said, and it should have felt like a victory. But all Simone felt was tired. Bone deep, soul-weary tired. I came here tonight thinking I wanted answers, Simone said slowly. Thinking that if I could just understand why, I could find some kind of peace. But there is no peace in this. Just 3 people who made selfish choices and left carnage in their wake. What do you want me to say? Naomi's voice was raw. That I'll leave him? That I'll walk away from my marriage before it's even 12 hours old? Would that make you feel better? I don't know. And that was the truest thing Simone had said all night. I honestly don't know what would make me feel better. Because there's no version of this where everyone gets a happy ending. They stood in silence, 2 women who'd once been one entity, now separated by choices and betrayals that could never be undone. Finally, Simone spoke. I'm leaving. I'm going back to Brooklyn, and I'm going to figure out how to live my life without either of you in it. And maybe someday, years from now, I'll be able to think about this without feeling like I'm drowning. But not today. Simone, wait. But Simone was already walking away, her footsteps echoing down the corridor. Behind her, she could hear Naomi sobbing, the sound raw and broken. Part of her wanted to turn back, to comfort her sister the way they'd comforted each other through every childhood nightmare and teenage heartbreak. But she kept walking. She emerged back into the ballroom, which had thinned considerably. The DJ was playing slower songs now, and a handful of couples swayed on the dance floor. Theo was among them, dancing with his mother, his expression distant. He saw Simone. Their eyes met across the room, and for a moment, she saw regret there. Real, genuine regret. But it was too late for regret. Too late for apologies or explanations. Simone grabbed her clutch from table 17 and headed for the exit. The cool night air hit her as she stepped outside the plaza, and she gulped it down, trying to cleanse her lungs of the ballroom's suffocating atmosphere. She'd call an Uber. Go home. Start the long, painful process of rebuilding her life. Again. Simone Clark. She turned to find a man approaching from the valet area. He was tall, dark-skinned, impeccably dressed in a suit that suggested wealth without screaming it. His eyes, a warm brown, regarded her with something that might have been concern. Yes. I'm sorry to intrude. He had a slight accent she couldn't place. I'm Julian Hayes. I was one of the guests tonight, business associate of Theodore's father. I couldn't help but notice you seemed distressed inside, and then I saw you leave alone. He trailed off, seeming to realize how creepy this might sound. I apologize. That came out wrong. I just wanted to make sure you were all right. Do you need a cab? Is there someone I can call? Simone studied him. There was something genuine in his expression, a kindness that didn't feel performative. I'm fine, she said automatically. Then, surprising herself, actually, no. I'm not fine at all. But I will be. Julian nodded slowly. Weddings can be complicated affairs. Especially when there's history involved. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who's learned to read between the social niceties. He smiled slightly. Also, I saw the bride follow you into that back corridor, and when she emerged 15 minutes later, her makeup was destroyed. Doesn't take a detective to connect the dots. Despite everything, Simone almost laughed. You should be a detective. Too much paperwork. He gestured toward the line of waiting cars. My driver is just there. I'd be happy to offer you a ride home, if you're comfortable with that. No strings, no agenda. Just one person offering another person help after what was clearly a difficult evening. Simone should say no. Should maintain her independence, call her own Uber, keep her walls up. But she was so tired of walls. So tired of being strong and self-sufficient and alone. Brooklyn, she said. Crown Heights. Done. Julian led her toward a sleek black town car. As they settled into the leather seats and the driver pulled away from the plaza, he said, You know, I find that sometimes the best thing after a terrible evening is a completely unrelated story from a stranger. Would you like to hear about the time I accidentally bought a haunted chateau in the French countryside? And for the first time that night, maybe for the first time in 3 years, Simone genuinely smiled. The Monday after the wedding, Simone called in sick. It wasn't entirely a lie. She felt physically ill, stomach churning, head pounding, exhaustion so profound it seemed to have seeped into her bones. She'd spent all of Sunday in bed, alternating between staring at the ceiling and scrolling mindlessly through her phone, ignoring the 17 missed calls from Naomi and the 3 voicemails from her father. She couldn't face her 7th graders. Couldn't stand in front of a classroom and talk about symbolism in The Outsiders when her own life had become a cautionary tale about betrayal and broken families. Instead, she lay on her couch with Duchess curled against her stomach, watching reality TV shows where other people's manufactured drama made her own life feel almost normal by comparison. Her phone buzzed for the 18th time. Naomi again. Simone silenced it and closed her eyes. She'd almost drifted off when her doorbell rang, an insistent, repeated buzzing that suggested whoever was outside wasn't planning to leave. Groaning, Simone dragged herself upright and shuffled to the intercom. Yes. Simone, it's me. Please let me up. Naomi. Of course. Go away. I'm not leaving until we talk. I'll stand out here all day if I have to. Mrs. Rodriguez from 2B has already asked if I'm okay. I told her I'm here to see my sister, and she said she'd bring me tea if I needed to wait. So you can either let me up now, or I can become best friends with your entire building. Despite everything, the corner of Simone's mouth twitched. Mrs. Rodriguez was a 78-year-old gossip who would absolutely take Naomi under her wing and extract every detail of their drama. Fine. Simone buzzed her in. But I'm not promising to be civil. I'll take what I can get. 3 minutes later, Naomi appeared at her door, looking nothing like the radiant bride from Saturday night. She wore jeans and an oversized sweater, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. No makeup. Dark circles under her eyes that suggested she'd slept as poorly as Simone. Can I come in? Simone stepped aside wordlessly, and Naomi entered the small apartment. She'd been here before, of course. Back when they were still close, before everything fell apart. Back when Simone would call her sister over for wine and Netflix binges, when they'd talk about their dreams and disappointments the way twins were supposed to. Your place looks good, Naomi said, clearly grasping for neutral territory. Did you rearrange? What do you want, Naomi? Her sister flinched at the cold tone but pressed forward. I want to explain. Really explain. Not in some service corridor at my wedding, but properly. You deserve that much. I deserve a lot more than that. Simone crossed her arms. But I'm listening. Naomi sank onto the couch, the same worn second-hand piece Simone had bought when she first moved to Brooklyn. Duchess, the traitor, immediately jumped into her lap, purring loudly. Do you remember, Naomi began slowly, when we were 16, and you decided you wanted to try out for the school play? Simone frowned at the apparent non sequitur. What does that have to do with anything? Just, bear with me. Naomi stroked Duchess absently. You wanted to audition for Maria in West Side Story. You practiced for weeks, had Mom help you with the songs. You were so excited. I didn't get the part, Simone said flatly. Jasmine Montgomery got it. Because I sabotaged you. Naomi's voice was quiet. I told Jasmine that you were nervous about the high notes, that you'd been struggling with them in practice. She went to Mr. Chen and suggested she could handle the vocal demands better. And he believed her. The memory surfaced, still carrying the sting of 16-year-old disappointment. You did what? I was jealous. Naomi looked up, her eyes glistening. You were always the creative one, the one who could sing and write and make people feel things. I was just good at math and business strategy. Mom and Dad praised you for being artistic, for having passion. And I hated it. So when I saw you were about to have this moment, this triumph, I couldn't stand it. I had to take it away. You've been holding on to that for 16 years. It's not just that. Naomi's voice cracked. It's everything. Growing up in your shadow, being the other twin. People would say, oh, you're Simone's sister, not the other way around. You were funnier, more personable, more likable. I was just the serious one, the ambitious one. The one Dad could mold into his successor because you were too busy being yourself. Naomi. When I met Theo that summer after college, Naomi continued, he was the first person who saw me first. Not us as a unit. Not you and then me as an afterthought. Just me. And I fell so hard, so fast. But I was terrified of not being enough, of losing myself in a relationship when I was supposed to be building my career. So I pushed him away. She wiped at her eyes with the sleeve of her sweater. And then I introduced you two at my birthday party, thinking I was evolved enough, mature enough to watch you be happy with someone I'd lost. But every time you called me gushing about him, every time you told me how perfect he was, how in love you were, it was like being 16 again, watching you have something I wanted but couldn't have. So you took it. Simone's voice was hard. You took him, just like you took my role in the play. No. Naomi shook her head vehemently. I didn't plan it, Simone. I swear. When he came to me that night before your anniversary, confused and conflicted, I tried to send him away. Told him to go home to you, to work through whatever he was feeling. But he kissed me, and all those buried feelings just exploded. And I'm not proud of it, but I kissed him back. And then he disappeared from both our lives. Because he felt guilty. Naomi's hands were trembling now. He realized what he'd done, proposed to one sister while still having feelings for another. He told me he needed time, needed to figure out who he really was outside of his family's expectations and his relationships. So he left. Traveled for a while, went to therapy, worked on himself. And when he came back, he chose you. When he came back, he was different. More honest. He told me about his childhood, about the pressure from his parents to marry someone from the right background, about how he'd been attracted to you because you were outside all of that. You were real and passionate and didn't care about his family name. But you did care. Understanding was dawning, cold and clear. You were the safe choice. The one his parents would approve of. Maybe at first, Naomi admitted. But what we built over these past 2 years. Simone, it's real. I know you don't want to believe that. But it is. We worked through things. He was honest about his feelings for you, about the guilt he carried. And I was honest about my own jealousy and insecurity. We went to couples therapy before he even proposed. How progressive. Simone's laugh was bitter. You both got therapy for fucking over my life. You have every right to be angry. Don't. Simone held up a hand. Don't tell me what rights I have. Don't try to make this okay by sharing your tragic backstory about sibling rivalry. You made choices, Naomi. So did Theo. And those choices destroyed me. I know. Naomi was crying openly now. I know, and I hate myself for it. But I also can't, I won't, apologize for loving him. For choosing my own happiness even if it cost me your trust. It cost you more than my trust. Simone's voice was steady now. Resolved. It cost you your sister. The words hung between them, final and devastating. Naomi stood, gently depositing Duchess on the couch. I brought something. She pulled an envelope from her purse, setting it on the coffee table. It's from Theo. He wanted to give it to you at the wedding, but obviously that didn't happen. Read it or don't. But know that he is sorry. We both are. Sorry doesn't fix anything. No. Naomi agreed quietly. It doesn't. But maybe someday, you'll be able to forgive us. Not for our sake, but for yours. Because carrying this anger, it'll eat you alive, Simone. I've watched you do it for 3 years, and it breaks my heart. You broke my heart first. Naomi's face crumpled, but she nodded. I did. And I'll have to live with that. She moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, you were always the better sister. The kinder one. The one who deserved good things. I hope you find them, even if it means cutting me out completely. Then she was gone, leaving only the envelope on the coffee table and the fading scent of her perfume. Simone stared at the envelope for a long time. White, expensive stationery. Her name written in Theo's distinctive handwriting, all sharp angles and careful precision. She should burn it. Throw it away without reading. Maintain her anger and righteousness. Instead, she picked it up. The letter was 3 pages long, handwritten in black ink. Simone. I've started this letter 100 times over the past 2 years, and every version felt inadequate. How do you apologize for something unforgivable? How do you explain the inexplicable? I was a coward. That's the simplest truth, though it doesn't begin to cover the depth of what I did to you. When I proposed that night in your apartment, I meant every word. I loved you. I wanted to marry you. But I also knew, somewhere deep down, that I was lying to both of us. I'd never fully processed my feelings for Naomi. I'd convinced myself that what we had was just a youthful romance, something I'd outgrown. But when I fell in love with you, part of what drew me was how much you reminded me of her. The same laugh, the same gestures, the same way of tilting your head when you were concentrating. You were familiar and new at the same time, a way to be close to what I'd lost without confronting why I'd lost it. That's not fair to you. You deserved someone who loved you for yourself, not as a reflection of someone else. And the horrible truth is, I didn't realize what I was doing until I was kneeling in your apartment with that ring. The night before our anniversary, I went to see Naomi. I told myself it was just a talk, to get closure on old feelings so I could move forward with you. But the moment I saw her, I knew I'd been lying to myself. The feelings weren't told. They'd never gone away. I should have told you. Should have come home that night and had the most difficult conversation of my life. Instead, I ran. Left you with questions and hurt and a ring that represented nothing but my cowardice. I kept the ring because I couldn't bear to return it. It felt like erasing you, erasing what we had. When I eventually proposed to Naomi with it, she knew its history. We argued about it. She wanted me to buy something new, to give you that much respect. But I convinced her it was about honoring the commitment I'd learned I could make, about taking something broken and making it whole. I was wrong. I see that now. I see a lot of things now that 2 years of therapy and brutal self-examination have forced me to confront. You asked me once, in your emails after I disappeared, if you'd done something wrong. If there was something you could have changed. The answer is no. You were perfect. Are perfect. Smart, passionate, genuine in a way I'd never experienced. You loved me without agenda, without caring about my family's money or connections. You just loved me. And I threw that away because I was too weak to be honest. Too afraid to hurt you directly, so I hurt you worse by vanishing. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know that what Naomi and I have built is real, even if its foundation is soaked in your pain. I need you to know that I've worked to become someone worthy of her, someone who doesn't run when things get difficult. And I need you to know that you will find someone better than me. Someone who sees you clearly, who chooses you without hesitation or comparison. Someone who deserves the gift of your love. I'm sorry, Simone. For all of it. For the life we might have had, for the trust one destroyed, for making you doubt yourself even for a moment. I hope someday you can be happy again. You deserve nothing less. Theo. Simone read the letter 3 times, her emotions cycling from anger to sadness to something she couldn't quite name. He was right. The apology didn't fix anything. But it did answer questions she'd been carrying for 3 years. And in some twisted way, that felt like progress. Her phone buzzed. Not Naomi this time. Unknown number. Hi Simone. This is Julian Hayes from Saturday Night. I hope it's okay that I got your number from the wedding guest list, with the coordinator's help. I wanted to check if you got home safely and see if you might be interested in coffee sometime. No pressure. I just enjoyed our conversation and would like to continue it without the backdrop of family drama. Julian. Simone stared at the message. She should ignore it. Should focus on healing, on rebuilding her life without romantic complications. But something about Julian had been easy. Comfortable. He'd made her laugh during the worst night of her life. Before she could overthink it, she typed back, "Coffee sounds good. When were you thinking?" The response came within seconds. "How about tomorrow? There's a great place in Brooklyn Heights if you're free around 2 p.m. It's a date. Send me the address." "Will do." "And Simone? I'm glad you said yes." She set the phone down and looked at Theo's letter again. Then, with deliberate care, she folded it back into its envelope and placed it in her desk drawer. Not destroyed, but put away. A record of what happened, but not the defining story of her life. Maybe that was healing. Not forgetting, but choosing to move forward anyway. On Tuesday at 1:45 p.m. Simone stood outside Grind Coffee House in Brooklyn Heights, checking her reflection in the window. She'd changed outfits 3 times before settling on jeans and a rust-colored sweater that brought out the warmth in her skin tone. Casual but put together. Like someone on a coffee date, not someone whose life had imploded 4 days ago. Julian was already inside, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups in front of him. He stood when he saw her, his smile genuine and unguarded. "You came," he said, as if he'd genuinely worried she wouldn't. "I almost didn't," Simone admitted, sliding into the seat across from him. "This morning I convinced myself it was too soon, that I needed more time to process everything." "And what changed your mind?" "I realized I've been putting my life on hold for 3 years, waiting to feel ready for things. Maybe ready never comes. Maybe you just have to do it anyway." Julian pushed one of the cups toward her. "I took a guess, vanilla latte with oat milk. If I'm wrong, I'll drink it and we'll order you something else." "How did you?" Simone stopped, laughing. "Did you ask the wedding coordinator about my coffee preferences too?" "I'm thorough in my research." His eyes crinkled at the corners. "Also, you mentioned on the drive home that you were lactose intolerant but missed real lattes, and vanilla seemed like a safe bet. You actually listened to my rambling." "Of course. You told me about your students, about teaching English to 7th graders who think Shakespeare is a type of pizza. About your cat Duchess, who you adopted from a shelter 3 years ago during a particularly dark period. About how you write poetry sometimes but never show anyone because you're convinced it's terrible." Simone felt heat rise in her cheeks. She'd forgotten how much she'd shared during that car ride, the champagne and emotional exhaustion loosening her tongue. "I can't believe I told you all that." "I'm glad you did." Julian wrapped his hands around his own cup. Black coffee, she noticed. "It's rare to meet someone genuinely passionate about what they do. Most people in my circles are passionate about money and status. Actually caring about something bigger than yourself is refreshing." "What do you do?" Simone realized she knew almost nothing about him beyond his kindness on Saturday night. "I'm in private equity." He grimaced slightly. "I know, not the most noble profession. I buy struggling companies, restructure them, hopefully make them profitable again. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But it pays well and gives me the freedom to travel." "Is that the accent?" Simone had been trying to place it since they met. "Where are you from originally?" "London. Mostly. My mother was British, father Jamaican. They met at Oxford, fell madly in love, scandalized both families." His expression softened. "They died in a car accident when I was 12. I spent my teenage years bouncing between relatives in London and Kingston before university at Cambridge." "I'm sorry." The words felt inadequate, but Simone meant them. It was a long time ago. Julian's smile was gentle. "But it taught me something important. Life is brutally short, and the people who say there's always more time are lying to themselves. If you want something, if someone matters to you, you tell them. You don't wait." There was weight behind those words, intention that made Simone's pulse quicken. "Is that why you texted me?" she asked. "Because life is short." "Partially." He leaned forward slightly. "But mostly because I watched you at that wedding, a woman attending her sister's marriage to a man you clearly had history with, and instead of making a scene or leaving immediately, you stayed. You held your head high, faced your pain directly. That takes remarkable strength. Or remarkable stupidity. I prefer to think of it as courage." Julian's gaze was steady, warm. "And I thought, here's someone who deserves better than whatever happened to her. Someone who deserves to be chosen first, not as an afterthought." The words echoed Theo's letter. "You will find someone who chooses you without hesitation," and Simone felt something crack open in her chest. "You don't know me," she said softly. "You don't know what kind of baggage I'm carrying." "Then tell me." Julian's voice was an invitation, not a demand. "Tell me your story, and I'll tell you mine. And we'll figure out if there's something here worth exploring." So Simone told him. Everything. The relationship with Theo, the proposal, the disappearance. The 3 years of unanswered questions, the therapy, the slow rebuilding of her life. Naomi's betrayal, the wedding, the confrontation in the service corridor. Julian listened without interrupting, his expression shifting from sympathy to anger to understanding. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Your sister," he finally said, Made a choice that prioritized her happiness over your well-being. And your ex-fiancé was too cowardly to be honest. They don't deserve your forgiveness, at least not yet. Naomi seems to think I should forgive them for my own sake. That holding on to anger will eat me alive. Maybe. Julian's jaw tightened. Or maybe some anger is justified. Maybe you're allowed to be furious at people who hurt you profoundly. Forgiveness isn't a requirement for healing, Simone. Sometimes healing means accepting that some relationships are too damaged to salvage. It was what she needed to hear. Not platitudes about family or forgiveness, but permission to feel what she actually felt. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For not telling me everything happens for a reason, or that time heals all wounds, or any of the other meaningless phrases people trot out when they don't know what to say. I learned a long time ago, Julian said, that the worst thing you can do for someone in pain is minimize it. Your pain is valid. Your anger is valid. And taking all the time you need to process both is valid too. They talked for 3 hours. Coffee turned into lunch, lunch into a walk along the Brooklyn Heights promenade overlooking Manhattan. Julian told her about his work, his travels, his love of obscure jazz music and contemporary poetry. Simone found herself laughing, genuinely laughing, for the first time since before the wedding. I have a confession, Julian said as they paused at the railing, the afternoon sun painting the city in gold. When I saw you at the wedding, I thought you were the bride at first. You and your sister look remarkably similar. Twin thing, Simone said. Though Naomi would argue she's better looking. She'd be wrong. Julian's voice was matter-of-fact. There's something about the way you carry yourself, well-grounded, an authenticity. Your sister has polish and poise, but you have substance. That's a kind way of saying I'm a mess. No. He turned to face her fully. It's saying you're real. And real is infinitely more attractive than perfect. Simone's breath caught. They were standing close now, close enough that she could see the flecks of amber in his dark eyes, could smell the subtle cologne he wore. Julian, she started, not sure where she was going with it. I'm going to be honest with you, he interrupted gently. Because that's what you deserve. I'm interested in you, Simone. Not as a project or a rebound or someone to help heal. I'm interested in getting to know you, the real you, beyond the hurt and the history. But I also understand if you're not ready for that. If you need time, I'll wait. If you need space, I'll give it to you. There's no pressure here. It was the exact opposite of how things had started with Theo. Intense and immediate, a whirlwind romance that swept her off her feet before she could think clearly. This was different. Careful. Respectful. I don't know what I'm ready for, Simone admitted. But I'd like to find out. With you. Julian's smile was luminous. Then we'll figure it out together. Slowly. At whatever pace feels right. They exchanged numbers properly this time, made tentative plans for dinner later that week. When Julian walked her back to the subway station, he kissed her cheek, chaste and brief, but filled with promise. Simone rode the train home with a smile on her face, feeling something she hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope. The hope lasted approximately 16 hours. Simone was at school, in the middle of explaining metaphor to her second-period class, when the classroom door opened and Principal Martinez appeared, her expression carefully neutral. Ms. Clark, may I see you in the hall for a moment? Simone assigned her student a reading passage and stepped outside, confusion turning to alarm when she saw her father standing beside the principal. Dad? What are you doing here? Howard looked haggard, older than she'd ever seen him. We need to talk. Now. I'm teaching. Principal Martinez has agreed to cover your class for a few minutes. His voice carried that tone that brooked no argument, the CEO voice he used in board meetings. Please, Simone. It's important. They walked to the empty library, Howard's silence heavy with unspoken urgency. When the door closed behind them, he turned to face her, and she saw something in his eyes that made her stomach drop. Fear. It's Naomi, he said without preamble. She's in the hospital. The world tilted. What happened? She collapsed this morning. We're not sure why yet. They're running tests. But Simone, before they took her back, she was asking for you. Begging for you, actually. Said she needed to tell you something, that it couldn't wait. What could possibly be that urgent? I think she's dying. Howard's voice cracked, and Simone realized with shock that he was crying. Her father, who'd built an empire through sheer force of will and never showed weakness, was crying. The doctors aren't saying it explicitly, but I can see it in their faces. Something's very wrong, and she knows it, and she's asking for her sister. Simone's mind was racing. This had to be manipulation. Had to be Naomi's way of forcing a reconciliation that Simone wasn't ready for. But Howard's tears were real. His fear was real. What hospital? She heard herself ask. Mount Sinai. I have a car waiting. She should say no. Should maintain her boundaries. Protect herself from further hurt. But underneath all the anger and betrayal lived something she couldn't quite kill: love. The love of one twin for another, forged before birth, stronger than logic or self-preservation. Let me get my things, Simone said quietly. As they drove through Manhattan traffic, Howard's hand found hers and squeezed. And Simone, despite everything, squeezed back. Mount Sinai's ICU was a sterile maze of beeping machines and hushed conversations, where the smell of antiseptic couldn't quite mask the underlying scent of fear. Howard led Simone through corridors that seemed to stretch endlessly, past rooms where other families maintained their vigils, their faces etched with the same desperate hope she saw in her father's eyes. They stopped outside room 847. Through the window, Simone could see Naomi lying in the hospital bed, looking impossibly small beneath white sheets. Her skin had an ashen quality that made her look like a ghost of herself. Various monitors surrounded her, their rhythmic beeping the only sound piercing the silence. Theo sat in a chair beside the bed, holding Naomi's hand. His hair was disheveled, his shirt wrinkled, the composed businessman from the wedding replaced by someone who looked haunted. I can't go in there with him, Simone said, her voice barely above a whisper. Howard nodded. I'll ask him to step out. Just, please, Simone. She needs you. He entered the room, and Simone watched through the window as he spoke quietly to Theo. The younger man's head snapped up, his eyes finding Simone through the glass. Even from a distance, she could see the relief wash over his face, followed immediately by shame. Theo stood, leaned down to kiss Naomi's forehead, and walked toward the door. As he passed Simone in the hallway, he paused. Thank you for coming, he said, his voice raw. She's been asking for you since she woke up. Wouldn't let them sedate her until she saw you. What happened? Simone asked, not looking at him. They think it's a cerebral aneurysm. The words came out broken. She had a headache yesterday, said she felt strange. This morning she just collapsed. By the time the ambulance got there. He trailed off, unable to finish. How bad is it? They're prepping her for emergency surgery in an hour. The neurosurgeon said there's a 60% chance she'll make it through. And if she does? His voice cracked completely. There could be brain damage, memory loss, paralysis. They don't know. Simone felt her own eyes burning. Despite everything, despite the betrayal and the hurt and the 3 years of anger, this was still Naomi. Still her twin, her other half. I need to see her alone, Simone said. Theo nodded and walked away, his shoulders hunched with grief. Howard squeezed Simone's shoulder once, then followed Theo down the hall, leaving her standing outside room 847. Simone took a deep breath and pushed open the door. Naomi's eyes were closed, her breathing shallow. The monitors showed numbers and graphs that meant nothing to Simone but somehow conveyed the fragility of the moment. And 4 dripped clear fluid into her sister's arm. The wedding ring, brand new, barely worn, caught the harsh fluorescent light. Naomi, Simone said softly, moving to the bedside. Her sister's eyes fluttered open, taking a moment to focus. When they did, tears immediately spilled down her cheeks. You came, Naomi whispered. Her voice was weak, thready. I was so afraid you wouldn't come. Dad said you were asking for me. Simone sat in the chair Theo had vacated, still warm from his presence. What's so urgent it couldn't wait? Everything. Naomi tried to shift in the bed and winced. Everything I should have said years ago. Simone, I'm so sorry. For all of it. For being a terrible sister, for taking Theo, for, a cough interrupted her, painful and wet. Don't, Simone said, surprising herself. Don't apologize again. Just tell me why. Really why. No more stories about sibling rivalry or teenage jealousy. The truth. Naomi closed her eyes for a moment, gathering strength. When she opened them, there was a clarity there that Simone hadn't seen on Monday. "Do you remember," Naomi began, "the day we found out Mom was sick?" Simone's breath caught. Their mother's death 5 years ago was a wound they never discussed, too painful to probe. "We were at that restaurant," Naomi continued. "The Italian place she loved in the village. She'd called us both, said she had news. And I knew, Simone. Before she even said the words, I knew it was bad. I could see it in her eyes." "Pancreatic cancer," Simone whispered. "Stage 4. She had 6 months. 6 months to say everything she needed to say, to put her affairs in order." Naomi's voice was getting weaker, but she pushed on. "And do you remember what she said to us? Her final piece of advice?" Simone did remember. They'd been sitting in her mother's hospital room, the three of them, 2 weeks before the end. Their mother, ravaged by disease but still fiercely present, had taken both their hands. She said, "Don't waste your life being the person everyone expects you to be," Simone recited. "Find what makes you happy and grab it with both hands, consequences be damned." "I took that to heart," Naomi said. "Maybe too much to heart. Because when Theo came back into my life, when I realized I still loved him, that I'd always loved him, I remembered Mom's words. And I decided that for once in my life, I wasn't going to be the dutiful daughter or the responsible twin. I was going to choose what I wanted, even if it hurt people I loved. Even if it hurt me. Especially if it hurt you." Naomi's tears were flowing freely now. "Because if I could hurt you and still choose him, it meant my feelings were real. It meant I wasn't just doing what was expected or convenient. It meant I was finally being honest about what I wanted." "That's twisted, Naomi." "I know." Her sister's laugh was bitter. "I know it's selfish and cruel and probably says terrible things about me as a person. But Simone, I spent my whole life being second. Second born, by 3 minutes. Second in Mom's affections, don't pretend it wasn't true, we both know she connected with you more. Second in natural talent and charisma. The only place I came first was in Dad's business, and that's because you didn't want it. So you took Theo to finally be first at something." "No." Naomi gripped Simone's hand with surprising strength. "I took Theo because I loved him. Because he saw me, really saw me, in a way no one else ever had. And yes, there was a sick satisfaction in taking something that was yours. In proving I could be chosen first for once. But that's not why I married him. I married him because when I'm with him, I'm not the shadow twin. I'm just Naomi." The words hung in the air, ugly and honest. Simone wanted to yank her hand away, to tell Naomi that her reasons were unforgivable, that love didn't excuse cruelty. But looking at her sister, pale and broken, possibly dying, she found she couldn't muster the anger. "You're not the shadow twin," Simone said quietly. "You never were. That was all in your head, Naomi. Mom loved us equally. Dad, okay, Dad has always played favorites, but that's his damage, not yours. And the reason people gravitated to me wasn't because I was better. It was because you held yourself apart. You built walls and called it strength. I know that now." Naomi's eyes were drifting closed. "Therapy is very enlightening. But by the time I figured it out, I'd already destroyed our relationship. Already married your ex-fiancé. Already became the villain in your story." "You are the villain in my story," Simone said, "but there was less heat in it now. You and Theo both made choices that devastated me. That changed the trajectory of my life. And I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive either of you for that. I don't expect you to." Naomi's breathing was becoming more labored. "But I need you to know something. The night of the wedding, after we talked, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about everything I'd taken from you. And I realized that even if I have Theo, even if I have Dad's approval and the successful career and the perfect wedding, I lost the most important thing. I lost my sister." Her grip on Simone's hand tightened. "You were my first friend, Simone. Before I could even talk, you were there. We had our own language that Mom couldn't understand. We used to switch places in school and fool the teachers. We planned to be roommates forever, remember? We were going to get an apartment together in Manhattan and take on the world. That was before you chose your ambition over our relationship." "I didn't choose ambition." Naomi's voice was barely audible now. "I chose fear. Fear of being overshadowed, fear of not being enough, fear of being alone. And in choosing fear, I lost the one person who would have stood by me through anything. The machine started beeping more insistently. A nurse appeared in the doorway, checking readings with a concerned expression. "We need to prep her for surgery," the nurse said gently to Simone. "You should say your goodbyes now." Goodbyes. As if this might be the last conversation they ever had. As if Naomi might not wake up from the surgery, or might wake up as someone else entirely. "Simone," Naomi whispered urgently, fighting against the drowsiness pulling her under. "I need you to know, if I don't make it, tell Theo." "Tell him yourself," Simone interrupted. "You're going to make it through this surgery, and you're going to have the life you chose. The life with him." "But if I don't?" "Naomi." Simone leaned closer, her voice firm. "You don't get to die. You don't get to take the easy way out of facing what you did. You're going to survive this, and then you're going to live with your choices. We both are." A weak smile crossed Naomi's face. "Still bossy. Someone has to be." Simone felt tears sliding down her own cheeks now. "And for what it's worth. I don't want you to die, Naomi. I'm furious at you. I might be furious at you for the rest of our lives. But you're still my sister. Still my twin. And the world would be wrong without you in it." "I love you," Naomi whispered. "I've always loved you. Even when I was hurting you." "I know." And Simone did know. That was the terrible truth. Love and betrayal weren't mutually exclusive. "I love you too. Which is why this hurt so much." The medical team was entering the room now, preparing to move Naomi to surgery. Simone stood, but Naomi held onto her hand with surprising desperation. "Promise me something," Naomi said, her words slurring slightly from the pre-op medication they'd just administered. "Promise me you won't let this, what I did, poison the rest of your life. Promise me you'll find someone who chooses you first. Someone who deserves you." "I'm working on it," Simone said, thinking of Julian and their coffee date. "Now let go so they can save your life." Naomi's grip loosened, and the medical team began wheeling her bed toward the door. As they passed, Naomi's eyes locked with Simone's one last time. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. "It means everything." Then she was gone, disappeared through the doorway and down the hall toward an operating room where her fate would be decided by surgeons' hands and the random mercy of biology. Simone found Howard and Theo in the surgical waiting room, sitting on opposite sides of the space as if they couldn't bear to be near each other. Her father stood immediately when he saw her, searching her face for information. "How is she?" "Scared. Honest. Still Naomi." Simone sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. "They took her to surgery." "What did she say to you?" Theo asked, his voice hoarse. Simone looked at him properly for the first time since the wedding. He looked wrecked, shirt rumpled, stubble darkening his jaw, eyes red from crying. This was what grief looked like on him, raw and unfiltered. "She told me the truth," Simone said. "Finally." "Did it help?" Howard asked gently. "Did it give you any peace?" "I don't know," Simone admitted. "Ask me after the surgery. Ask me when I know if my sister is going to live or die." They settled into the particular kind of limbo that hospitals specialized in, waiting without knowing, hoping without guarantees. Howard paced, making phone calls to board members and business associates, his way of coping through control. Theo sat motionless, his head in his hands, occasionally shaking with silent sobs. And Simone simply existed, caught between past and present, between anger and love, between the sister she'd lost and the one currently fighting for her life. Hours crawled by. 2, then 3, then 4. Other families came and went, receiving news good and bad. The waiting room's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, harsh and unrelenting. Finally, at 6:47 p.m., a surgeon appeared in the doorway. She was Asian, middle-aged, with kind eyes that had seen too much. Family of Naomi Whitmore. They all stood as one, a temporary united front. "I'm Dr. Chen," the surgeon said. "The surgery went as well as could be expected. We were able to repair the aneurysm, and there was less damage than we initially feared. She's in recovery now. Will she be okay?" Theo's voice cracked. "Will she be herself?" "It's too early to tell the extent of any neurological impact. The next 72 hours are critical. But she's young, healthy, and she has a strong will to survive. Those factors work in her favor. When can we see her? Howard asked. She'll be in recovery for another hour. Then we'll move her to ICU. Immediate family only, and brief visits. She needs rest above all else. I'm her husband, Theo said immediately. And I'm her father. They both looked at Simone, waiting for her to claim her place in line. I'm her sister, Simone said quietly. But I'll wait. You two go first. Relief and gratitude flooded Theo's face. Thank you, he whispered. As they followed Dr. Chen toward the recovery area, Howard paused, turning back to Simone. You're a better person than I am, he said. A better person than any of us deserve. Then they were gone, leaving Simone alone in the waiting room. She pulled out her phone and, without letting herself overthink it, sent a text to Julian. My sister is in the hospital. Emergency brain surgery. She's okay for now, but I'm a mess. I know it's a lot to ask, but could you come sit with me? I don't want to be alone. His response came within seconds. Send me the address. I'm on my way. Julian arrived 40 minutes later, carrying 2 cups of actual good coffee from somewhere that wasn't the hospital cafeteria and a worn paperback. I brought Neruda, he said, handing her the book along with the coffee. Poetry for impossible situations. Simone nearly cried at the thoughtfulness of it. How did you know? You told me you love poetry but think your own writing is terrible. I figured maybe someone else's words might help when your own fail you. They sat side by side in the uncomfortable waiting room chairs, not talking, just existing together. Julian didn't press for details or offer meaningless platitudes. He simply opened the book and began reading quietly, his accented voice transforming Neruda's Spanish into something almost musical. I love you without knowing how, or when, or from where, he read. I love you straightforwardly, without complexities or pride, so I love you because I know no other way. That's beautiful, Simone whispered. It's honest, Julian corrected gently, which is rarer than beauty. They stayed like that for an hour, Julian reading poetry while Simone sipped coffee and felt some of the tension drain from her shoulders. When Howard finally returned, looking slightly less haggard, he seemed surprised to find Julian there. Dad, this is Julian Hayes. Julian, my father, Howard Clark. Recognition flickered in Howard's eyes. Hayes. You're in private equity. We bid against each other on that warehouse conversion in Queens last year. And you won, Julian said diplomatically. It was a fair fight. Can I see her now? Simone interrupted before they could launch into business talk. Howard nodded. She's awake. Groggy from the anesthesia, but awake. Asking for you, actually. Of course she is, Simone said, but there was no bitterness in it. Just tired acceptance. She followed her father to ICU, leaving Julian with a promise to return soon. Outside Naomi's room, she paused, steeling herself. Her sister looked impossibly fragile, head bandaged, skin pale against the white pillows. But her eyes were open and clear when they found Simone's. You're alive, Simone said, moving to the bedside. Apparently. Naomi's voice was weak but recognizably hers. The doctor said I got lucky. The aneurysm was in a place they could reach without causing major damage. How do you feel? Like someone performed surgery on my brain. A ghost of Naomi's usual humor flickered across her face. But I can remember everything. Move everything. String sentences together. So I guess I'll take it. Good. Simone pulled up a chair. Because we still have a lot to work through, and it would be inconvenient if you'd forgotten all the reasons I'm angry at you. Naomi's laugh was weak but genuine. Ever practical, Simone. They sat in silence for a moment, the machines monitoring Naomi's vital signs providing a steady backdrop. I meant what I said before, Naomi finally spoke. About you finding someone who chooses you first. You deserve that. I might have, Simone admitted. Found someone, I mean. It's new, barely even started. But his, different. Kind. Honest. He reads me poetry in hospital waiting rooms. His here. Naomi's eyes widened. You brought him to see me. I brought him to support me. There's a difference. But Simone smiled slightly. His name is Julian. We met at your wedding, actually. He gave me a ride home when I was falling apart. Good. Naomi's eyes were drifting closed again. That's good. You deserve good things, Simone. Even if I was the one who took them away for a while. We'll figure it out, Simone said, surprising herself with the words. The whole sister thing. It won't be what it was, and maybe it shouldn't be. But we'll figure out what it can be instead. I'd like that, Naomi whispered, already half asleep from the medication. I'd really like that. Simone stayed until Naomi's breathing evened out into sleep, then quietly left the room. In the hallway, she found Theo leaning against the wall, looking lost. She's sleeping, Simone told him. But she's okay. She's going to be okay. Thank you, Theo said. For coming, for talking to her. For not letting your anger stop you from being there when she needed you. Don't mistake it for forgiveness, Simone said firmly. I came because she's my sister, and I love her despite everything. But you and we're not okay, Theo. We probably never will be. I know. He looked down at his wedding ring, spinning it absently. For what it's worth, my letter meant every word. You deserved better than what I gave you. Yes, Simone agreed. I did. And I'm finding it. So you need to make sure you deserve Naomi. Actually deserve her, not just possess her. Because if you hurt her the way you hurt me, if you disappear when things get difficult. She let the threat hang unfinished. I won't, Theo said. I've learned from my mistakes. Naomi is it for me. The real thing, not a rehearsal or a stand-in. I'd die before I hurt her. See that you don't, Simone said. Then, softer, take care of my sister, Theo. Even though I'm furious at both of you, even though what you did was unforgivable, I still want her to be happy. She walked away before he could respond, back toward the waiting room where Julian was still reading poetry to an empty chair, waiting for her return. How is she? Julian asked, standing as Simone approached. Alive. Herself. As okay as she can be given that someone just operated on her brain. Simone took his hand, letting herself be comforted by the solid warmth of it. Thank you for coming. For being here. You didn't have to. Yes, I did, Julian said simply. Because when someone I care about is hurting, I show up. No matter how new or undefined the relationship might be. We should probably define it, Simone said. At some point. When you're ready. He tucked a stray curl behind her ear, the gesture tender. There's no rush. We have time. Time. Something that had felt so scarce these past 3 years, measured in the absence of answers and the weight of betrayal. But standing here, hand in hand with someone who'd chosen to show up without being asked, Simone felt like maybe time could be abundant again. Maybe healing wasn't about forgetting what happened or even fully forgiving it. Maybe it was about choosing to move forward anyway, carrying the scars but not letting them define the journey. Come on, she said, tugging Julian toward the exit. Let's get out of this hospital. I need air that doesn't smell like antiseptic and grief. Where do you want to go? Anywhere, Simone said. Everywhere. Somewhere we can just be two people getting to know each other without the weight of family drama and hospital waiting rooms. I know just the place, Julian said, his smile warm and sure. And for the first time in 3 years, Simone believed that maybe, just maybe, there were still good surprises waiting for her in the world. 3 months later. Simone stood in front of her bathroom mirror, adjusting the collar of her emerald green dress for the 3rd time. Duchess wound between her ankles, meowing insistently about dinner being 5 minutes late. I know, Simone muttered, checking her makeup one last time. But some of us have places to be. Her phone buzzed on the counter. Julian's name appeared on the screen with a message, downstairs whenever you're ready. No rush, I brought a book. Of course he had. In the 3 months since Naomi's surgery, Simone had learned that Julian always brought a book. To restaurants while waiting for tables, to coffee shops, to her apartment when he arrived early. He joked that it was a British thing, this need to always have reading material on hand, but Simone suspected it was deeper than that, a man who'd learned early that people could disappear without warning, but stories were constant. She fed Duchess, grabbed her coat, and headed downstairs. Julian was leaning against his car. He'd upgraded from the town car service to actually driving himself when in the city, reading what looked like a worn copy of Baldwin. He looked up as she approached, his smile immediate and genuine. "You look beautiful," he said, pocketing the book. "You say that every time you see me." "Because it's true every time I see you." He opened the passenger door for her. "Ready for tonight?" Simone took a breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." Tonight was Naomi's post-recovery dinner party, a small gathering to celebrate her successful surgery and clean bill of health. Simone had been invited, of course. Had spent the past week debating whether to go, whether she was ready to sit at a table with Naomi and Theo and pretend they were working towards some version of normal. But Julian had pointed out, gently, that avoiding them forever wasn't healing, it was just a different kind of prison. And Simone was tired of being imprisoned by her pain. "We can leave whenever you want," Julian reminded her as they drove toward the Upper East Side brownstone where Naomi and Theo now lived. "Just say the word, and we're gone. No questions, no judgment." "You're very good at this," Simone observed. "At what?" "Being supportive without being controlling. Giving me space while also showing up. It's..." She searched for the right word. "Novel." "It's called being a decent human being," Julian said dryly. "The bar is apparently very low." "Theo set it low," Simone admitted. "But you've raised it considerably." They pulled up to the brownstone, a 4-story beauty that probably cost more than Simone would make in her entire teaching career. Theo's family money, most likely, or perhaps a wedding gift from his parents. Either way, it was the kind of home that belonged in architectural magazines, all exposed brick and modern fixtures. "Last chance to back out," Julian said, killing the engine. "No." Simone unbuckled her seatbelt. "I need to do this. For myself, not for them." Inside, the dinner party was small and intimate, just 8 people total. Howard was there, of course, along with Theo's parents whom Simone was meeting for the first time. Another couple, friends of Naomi and Theo's from their college days. And Dr. Chen, Naomi's neurosurgeon, whom Naomi had apparently bonded with during recovery. Naomi herself looked radiant. Her hair had been cut short during the surgery, a pixie cut that actually suited her better than the long, straightened hair she'd always worn. There was a small scar visible at her temple, but she made no effort to hide it. She wore a simple black dress and minimal jewelry, and when she saw Simone, her entire face lit up. "You came," Naomi said, moving toward them. Her movements were still slightly careful, measured, the way people moved when they'd been reminded of their body's fragility. "And you must be Julian." "Naomi." Julian shook her hand politely. "I'm glad to see you recovered so well. Thanks to Dr. Chen's excellent work." Naomi gestured toward the elegant Asian woman in the corner. "And to this one," she indicated Simone, "for not letting me give up before the surgery." "I didn't do anything," Simone said uncomfortably. "You came when I asked. That was everything." Naomi's eyes were sincere, vulnerable in a way they'd never been before the aneurysm. "Come, let me introduce you to everyone." The evening was surprisingly pleasant. Theo's parents were less stuffy than Simone had imagined. His mother, Patricia, was actually funny in a dry, observational way, and his father, Theodore Jr., told stories about his son's childhood that made even Theo blush. Dr. Chen was fascinating, discussing the intricacies of neurosurgery with the passion of someone who genuinely loved their work. And Naomi seemed different. Softer, somehow. She laughed more easily, touched Theo with casual affection rather than possessive claim, and made a visible effort to include Simone in conversations without being overbearing about it. "The surgery changed her," Dr. Chen said quietly to Simone during cocktail hour. They were standing on the brownstone's back terrace, looking out over a small garden where string lights created patterns of warmth against the November darkness. "Not neurologically, that damage was minimal. But psychologically. There's something about facing your own mortality that reorganizes priorities." "She seems happier," Simone observed. "More at peace." "She told me about what happened between you two," Dr. Chen said. "I hope you don't mind. During recovery, patients often need to talk through their relationships, understand what matters to them." "What did she say?" "That she'd hurt you badly. That she'd chosen her own happiness over your well-being, and that she was learning to live with being someone capable of that kind of selfishness." Dr. Chen took a sip of her wine. "But also that she was grateful you came when she needed you. That it gave her hope you two might find your way back to each other eventually." I don't know if we can, Simone admitted. The trust is so broken. Trust can be rebuilt, Dr. Chen said. It just has to be rebuilt differently than it was before. Not as blind faith, but as earned confidence over time. It's harder, slower, but often stronger for having been tested. You sound like my therapist. I probably read the same books. Dr. Chen smiled. But for what it's worth, I've seen a lot of families torn apart by medical crises. The ones who survive intact aren't the ones who pretend nothing happened. They're the ones who acknowledge the damage and choose to keep showing up anyway. Inside, Howard was calling everyone to dinner. The dining room was elegant, a long table set with china that probably cost more than Simone's monthly rent, fresh flowers arranged with artistic precision. Place cards indicated seating. Julian and Simone were positioned across from Naomi and Theo, with Howard at the head of the table. The meal was catered, multiple courses of beautifully prepared food that Simone tried to appreciate but could barely taste through her nervousness. Conversation flowed around her, business talk between Howard and Theodore Jr., medical stories from Dr. Chen, college reminiscences from the other couple. But Simone kept catching Naomi watching her, those familiar eyes, the same shade as her own, filled with something that looked like hope. It wasn't until dessert, an elaborate chocolate creation that was almost too pretty to eat, that Naomi stood, tapping her wine glass gently. I wanted to thank you all for coming, she began, her voice steady but emotional. 3 months ago, I nearly died. And in those moments before surgery, waiting to find out if I'd wake up as myself or not wake up at all, I had a lot of clarity about what actually matters in life. Theo reached for her hand, and she squeezed it, smiling down at him before continuing. I realized I'd spent so much of my life competing, with colleagues, with expectations, with my own impossible standards, and most destructively, with my sister. Her eyes found Simone's. I'd turned our relationship into a contest I had to win, even when winning meant destroying something precious. Simone felt Julian's hand find hers under the table, grounding her. Simone, Naomi continued, and now there were tears in her eyes, I can't undo what I did. I can't give you back the 3 years I took, or erase the pain I caused. But I want you to know that I'm learning. Learning to be honest instead of strategic. Learning to value people over wins. Learning to be the sister you deserved all along, even if it's too late for us to have what we once had. The dining room was silent except for the soft classical music playing in the background. I don't expect your forgiveness, Naomi said. But I do hope, someday, we can find a way to be in each other's lives again. Not as we were, but as we are now, 2 women who've hurt each other and survived it, who share history and DNA and maybe, eventually, a cautious trust. She raised her glass. To second chances. To survival. And to the people who show up for us even when we don't deserve it. Everyone raised their glasses, echoing the toast. Simone raised hers too, meeting her sister's eyes across the table. After dinner, as guests mingled over coffee and after-dinner drinks, Naomi pulled Simone aside into a small study off the main living area. I meant every word, Naomi said once the door was closed. I know I've said sorry before, but I want you to know I'm not just sorry I hurt you. I'm sorry about who I became, someone who could rationalize hurting you because of my own insecurities. Naomi. Please, let me finish. Naomi took a breath. I've been in therapy. Real therapy, 3 times a week since the surgery. Working through why I needed to see us as competitors instead of allies. Why I couldn't just be happy for you without feeling diminished myself. And I'm learning that a lot of it wasn't about you at all. It was about me, my fears, my inability to believe I was enough on my own terms. That doesn't excuse what you did, Simone said quietly. No, it doesn't. Nothing excuses it. Naomi moved to the window, looking out at the dark street. But maybe understanding it helps us both move forward. Because, Simone, I miss you. I miss my sister. And I know I don't have the right to ask for that relationship back, but I'm asking anyway. Not for the old relationship, I know that's dead. But for the possibility of a new one, built on honesty instead of habit. Simone studied her twin, the shorter hair, the visible scar, the newfound vulnerability. Naomi was right. She had changed. The surgery hadn't just saved her life, it had somehow cracked open the carefully constructed facade she'd built over decades. I miss you too, Simone admitted, and saying it out loud felt like releasing a breath she'd been holding for 3 years. But I don't know how to trust you again. How to be around you and Theo without feeling that betrayal all over again. Then we start small, Naomi suggested. Coffee once a month, in public, with clear boundaries. You can bring Julian. I like him, by the way. He's good for you. He looks at you the way everyone deserves to be looked at. Like I'm actually worth something. Like you're everything. Naomi's smile was sad. The way Theo never quite looked at you, if I'm being honest. He loved you, but he loved the idea of escaping his family's expectations more. With you, he could be the rebel, the guy who chose passion over pedigree. But with me, it's different. It's complicated and messy, but it's real. I'm glad, Simone said, and surprised herself by meaning it. I'm glad you found something real, even though I hate how you found it. That's fair. Naomi turned from the window. So, coffee next month? No expectations, no pressure. Just two sisters trying to figure out if they can be in the same room without everything being terrible. Simone considered. 3 months ago, even the thought would have been impossible. But she'd been working through things in therapy too, learning that forgiveness wasn't the same as reconciliation, that she could acknowledge Naomi's humanity without absolving her of wrongdoing. And maybe Dr. Chen was right. Maybe trust rebuilt slowly was stronger than trust never tested. Coffee, Simone agreed. But I'm picking the place, and if it gets too uncomfortable, I'm leaving. Deal. Naomi's smile was tremulous but genuine. Thank you, Simone, for not giving up on the possibility of us. They returned to the party, and Simone found Julian deep in conversation with Theodore Jr. about British versus American financial regulations. He looked up as she approached, his eyes asking a silent question, "Are you okay?" She nodded, and his shoulders relaxed visibly. An hour later, after they'd said their goodbyes and were driving back to Brooklyn, Julian finally asked, "How are you feeling?" Confused, Simone admitted. Hopeful? Maybe. I don't know. 3 months ago, I would have sworn I'd never speak to Naomi again. But tonight, watching her, she's different. The surgery really did change her. Facing mortality will do that, Julian observed. When my parents died, I remember thinking I had to make every moment count because time was suddenly finite in a way I'd never understood before. Sounds like Naomi had a similar awakening. Do you think people can really change? Simone asked. Fundamentally change, not just make promises they can't keep. I think, Julian said carefully, that people can change if they want to badly enough and are willing to do the hard work. But I also think you don't owe anyone the chance to prove they've changed. Your healing doesn't require their redemption. That's very wise. I have my moments. He glanced at her with a smile. So what do you want to do? About Naomi, about all of it. I want to try, Simone said slowly. Not to go back to what we had, that's impossible. But to see if we can build something new. Something honest and boundaried and maybe, eventually, sisterly again. Then I support you completely, Julian said. And if it doesn't work out, if she hurts you again, I'll be here for that too. They pulled up to Simone's building, and Julian walked her to her door like he always did, refusing to let her navigate Brooklyn streets alone at night. Do you want to come up? Simone asked. It wasn't the first time she'd asked, but it felt significant somehow. Not for. I mean, just for coffee or tea or just to talk. If you want. I always want more time with you, Julian said simply. So yes. They climbed the 3 flights to her apartment, and Simone put the kettle on for tea while Julian settled onto her couch with Duchess immediately claiming his lap. It was domestic and comfortable, and Simone realized with a start that somewhere over the past 3 months, Julian had become integral to her life. Can I tell you something? She said, handing him a cup of chamomile. Always. 3 months ago, at Naomi's wedding, I thought my life was over. Like that was it. Proof that I'd never be enough, that I'd always be second choice, that love was just something that happened to other people. She sat beside him, tucking her legs under her. But then you showed up in the worst possible moment, and you've kept showing up every day since, and I'm realizing that maybe the story wasn't over. Maybe it was just beginning a new chapter. Julian set down his tea, his full attention on her. Simone. I'm not saying I'm ready for big declarations or life-changing decisions, she continued quickly. But I'm saying that what we have, this thing we're building, It feels real. It feels like the kind of love that chooses me first, the way Naomi said I deserved. It is real, Julian said, his voice rough with emotion. And I do choose you first. Not because you're perfect or uncomplicated, but because you're you, brave and kind and resilient and real. I choose you, Simone. Every day, without hesitation. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. And I'll keep choosing you, for as long as you'll let me. Simone leaned forward, closing the distance between them, and kissed him. It was different from the careful, tentative kisses they'd shared before. This one was deeper, more certain. A promise rather than a question. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing heavily, Julian rested his forehead against hers. I'm falling in love with you, he whispered. I probably have been since you got in my car that night, all righteous anger and broken hearts. But I'm telling you now because life is short, and the people who matter deserve to know they matter. I'm falling in love with you too, Simone admitted. It terrifies me, honestly. Because the last time I loved someone, it ended so badly. But you're not Theo. And I'm not who I was 3 years ago. So maybe we can figure this out together. We can, Julian assured her. One day, one choice, one moment at a time. They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped around each other on her second-hand couch, while Duchess purred between them and the Brooklyn night pressed against the windows. And for the first time in 3 years, Simone felt something she'd thought she'd lost forever. Peace. 6 months later. The cafe Simone had chosen for her monthly coffee with Naomi was a small independent place in Park Slope, halfway between both their worlds. They'd been meeting here for 5 months now, awkward at first, then gradually more comfortable, building something that wasn't quite the old sisterhood but wasn't strangers either. Today, though, Simone had something to tell her sister. Something that felt significant enough to warrant a face-to-face conversation. Naomi arrived exactly on time, as always. Her hair had grown out slightly, and she looked healthy, the translucent, fragile quality from right after the surgery completely gone. She ordered her usual oat milk latte and joined Simone at their regular corner table. You look happy, Naomi observed. Like, genuinely glowing. Should I be expecting niece or nephew news? What? No. Simone laughed. Julian and I are nowhere near that stage. But I do have news. Tell me. I'm quitting my teaching job, Simone said. At the end of this semester, I'm leaving public education. Naomi's eyes widened. You love teaching. What happened? Nothing bad. Actually, something good. Simone couldn't contain her smile. Julian's been encouraging me to take my writing seriously. Not just poetry in notebooks that no one sees, but actual writing. Submitting to journals. Working on a collection. And last month, I submitted some pieces to a few literary magazines. 3 of them accepted my work. Simone, that's incredible. There's more. A small press reached out after seeing one of the published poems. They want to see a full manuscript. It's not a guarantee of publication, but it's a real chance. And I realized I can't do both, teach full-time and write seriously. So I'm choosing writing. What about money? Brooklyn's not cheap, even in Crown Heights. Julian offered to help. Simone held up a hand at Naomi's expression, but I told him absolutely not. I've been saving for 3 years, living simply. And I'm getting a part-time tutoring position that'll cover rent and basics. It'll be tight, but I'll manage. Naomi reached across the table, squeezing Simone's hand. I'm proud of you. For taking the risk, for believing in your talent. Mom would be proud too. The mention of their mother, still painful but no longer forbidden between them, hung in the air. She always said you were the artist, Naomi continued. That you had something special, a way of seeing the world that needed to be shared. I was jealous of that, you know, of how easily words came to you, how you could make people feel things with just a sentence. You have your own gifts, Simone said. You built a career, earned Dad's respect. That's not nothing. It's not everything either. Naomi sighed. I've been thinking about that actually. About what I'm building and why. Theo and I have been talking about starting a family soon. And I'm realizing I don't want to be the kind of mother who's never home, who prioritizes deals over dinners. I want to be present. That's very UN Naomi of you. The old Naomi, Maybe. A rueful smile. The one who thought being busy meant being important. But the surgery taught me that importance is relative. When I thought I might die, I wasn't thinking about closed deals or Dad's approval. I was thinking about you, about Theo, about all the moments I'd missed chasing things that don't actually matter. Very philosophical for a Tuesday morning. Brain surgery will do that. Naomi's smile turned more genuine. Speaking of important things, how is Julian? Still reading poetry to you? Always. Last week he tried to teach me chess, which was a disaster because I kept moving pieces based on which squares looked prettier rather than strategy. He was very patient about it. He's good for you, Naomi said. You seem lighter when you talk about him. More yourself. I am myself with him, Simone realized. Completely, without editing or performing. He knows all the messy parts and loves me anyway. That's what we all deserve, Naomi said quietly. I'm glad you found it. They finished their coffee, talking about smaller things, Duchess's latest antics, a vacation Naomi and Theo were planning to the Amalfi Coast, a new restaurant Julian wanted to try. Easy conversation, the kind sisters had when they weren't weighted down by betrayal and hurt. As they stood to leave, Naomi hesitated. Can I ask you something? Sure. Do you think you'll ever fully forgive me? Not pretend to, not just move past it, but actually forgive. Simone considered the question seriously. I don't know, she admitted. Some days I think I'm almost there, and then something will remind me of how much you and Theo hurt me, and the anger comes flooding back. But I'm learning that forgiveness isn't a destination. It's a practice, something I choose again and again. And am I worth that practice? You're my sister, Simone said simply. My twin. We shared a womb before we shared anything else. So yes, you're worth it. Not because what you did was okay, but because throwing away our entire relationship would mean they win. The betrayal, the hurt, the anger. And I'm tired of letting them win. Naomi's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. For giving me a chance I don't deserve. You're welcome. But Naomi. Simone's voice turned serious. This only works if you keep being honest. The moment you start manipulating or hiding things, we're done. I can work with messy truth, but I can't survive polished lies. I understand. Full honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable. They hugged goodbye, still slightly awkward, still careful not to hold on too long, and went their separate ways. Simone walked to the subway feeling lighter, like she'd set down a heavy bag she'd been carrying for years. Her phone buzzed with a text from Julian. How did it go with Naomi? Good, she typed back. Really good, actually. Tell you about it over dinner? Your place or mine? Mine. I'll cook. Brave woman. See you at 7. Simone smiled and pocketed her phone. She had essays to grade before the end of the semester, a poetry manuscript to organize for the press, and a relationship to nurture with a man who'd proven, day after day, that love didn't have to hurt. The subway platform was crowded, the train delayed like always, and Brooklyn stretched out before her in all its chaotic beauty. And Simone Clark, 32 years old, heartbroken survivor, emerging poet, and cautiously optimistic sister, felt something she hadn't felt in 3 long years. She felt ready. Not for perfection or easy answers, but for the beautiful, messy, complicated reality of a life being rebuilt on her own terms. And that, she decided as the train finally arrived, was more than enough. 1 year later, the book launch party was held at a small independent bookstore in Fort Greene, the kind of place with creaky wooden floors and the smell of old paper and possibility. Scars and second chances. Poems of survival sat in neat stacks on a table near the entrance, Simone's name printed on the cover in elegant font. She stood near the back of the packed room, trying not to hyperventilate as people she knew and strangers she didn't mingled, holding copies of her book, drinking wine from plastic cups. You need to breathe, Julian murmured in her ear, his hand steady on her lower back. In through the nose, out through the mouth. There are so many people, Simone whispered. What if they hate it? What if they ask me to explain poems I don't remember writing? Then you'll improvise brilliantly, the way you always do. He kissed her temple. You're remarkable, Simone. And everyone here knows it. She looked around the room and felt her anxiety ease slightly. Her students, former students now, had shown up in force, several of them clutching signed copies and looking at her with awe. Dr. Patterson, her therapist, stood near the poetry section, giving her an encouraging thumbs up. Mrs. Rodriguez from her building had brought her entire book club. And there, near the front, stood Howard, Naomi, and Theo. Howard held a copy of her book like it was precious cargo, his eyes suspiciously shiny. Naomi and Theo stood close together, their hands linked, but Naomi's other hand waved enthusiastically when she caught Simone's eye. "Your family came," Julian observed. "Yeah," Simone said softly. "They did." The bookstore owner, a kind woman named Patricia, approached with a microphone. "Ready to do your reading?" "No," Simone thought. "Yes," she said, "ready." She walked to the front of the room, her hands shaking slightly as she opened to a marked page. The crowd quieted, faces turned toward her expectantly. "Thank you all for coming," Simone began. "A year ago, I was a full-time teacher who wrote poetry in secret, convinced it wasn't good enough to share. But someone told me that the stories we're most afraid to tell are usually the ones that need telling most." She glanced at Julian, who smiled. "So I started writing honestly, about heartbreak and betrayal, about family and forgiveness, about learning to choose yourself even when it's terrifying." She looked down at the page, then back up at her audience. "This poem is called The Bride, and it's about the moment everything changed." The bride turned around. And I saw my face wearing her smile. My hands in his hands. My future in her eyes. The bride turned around. And I learned that betrayal has a twin. That love can be stolen like breath. That some wounds are shaped exactly like you. The bride turned around. And I died there in that cathedral. Resurrection pending. Grace unearned but somehow given. The bride turned around. And I learned that ending is just beginning. Spelled backward. That loss makes room for finding. The bride turned around. And years later, I can say it. Thank you for breaking me. I'm better at the seams. The room was silent when she finished. Then applause erupted, genuine, enthusiastic, the kind that made Simone's eyes burn with unshed tears. She read 3 more poems, answered questions about her process, signed books until her hand cramped. And through it all, she felt held by the community she'd built, the life she'd chosen, the future she'd fought for. After most of the crowd had dispersed, Naomi approached with her copy of the book. "Would you sign it?" "You don't have to ask permission," Simone said, but she took the book anyway. "What do you want me to write?" "Whatever feels true." Simone thought for a moment, then wrote, "To Naomi, my first friend, my worst enemy, my sister. Thank you for the inspiration, even when it hurt. Here's to the messy middle ground we're building together. Love, Simone." Naomi read it and wiped her eyes. "It's perfect. You're perfect. The book is incredible, Simone." "It's honest," Simone corrected. "That's different than perfect." "Maybe honest is better," Naomi suggested. "Maybe perfect is overrated." "Definitely overrated," Theo agreed, joining them with Howard. He looked at Simone with something that might have been regret or pride or both. "Your writing is powerful. I'm glad you're sharing it with the world." "Thank you." Simone accepted the compliment without flinching. She and Theo would never be friends, but they'd achieved something like peaceful coexistence, acknowledgement without expectation. Howard pulled Simone into a hug, and she let herself be held by her father's familiar strength. "Your mother would be so proud," he whispered. "I'm so proud. I'm sorry it took me so long to say it." "You're saying it now," Simone replied. "That's what matters." After they left, after the bookstore closed and Patricia locked up behind them, Simone and Julian walked through Fort Greene hand in hand, the Brooklyn night alive with possibility. "How does it feel?" Julian asked. Published poet, successful book launch, family reconciliation in progress. "Surreal," Simone admitted. "Like I'm living someone else's life. Someone braver, more talented, more healed than I actually am." "Or maybe," Julian suggested, "you're living your own life. Finally. After years of living in reaction to other people's choices. When did you get so wise?" "I've always been this wise. You're just now noticing." He pulled her close, kissing her under streetlight like they were in a movie. "I have something to tell you." "Should I be worried?" "Depends on your position on major life changes." He took a breath. I've been offered a partnership in a new venture, a private equity firm focused on social impact investments. Company's doing good while doing well. The catch is it's based here in New York, which means I'd be staying permanently, not just visiting. Julian, that's amazing. The other catch, he continued, is that I'd need to find a proper place to live. My sublet ends next month, and I was thinking, maybe we could look for something together? Something with space for your writing, room for my books, and enough windows for Duchess to judge the neighbors. Simone's heart stuttered. You want to move in together? I want to build a life with you, Julian said simply. I know it's fast by some standards, but we're not some standards. We're us, two people who found each other in the wreckage and decided to build something beautiful anyway. So yes, I want to move in together. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to be the person who brings you coffee while you write and who listens to your rough drafts and who holds you when the doubt gets loud. What if I'm not ready? Simone asked, even though her heart was screaming yes, yes, now, always. Then we wait, Julian said. But Simone, you've been ready your whole life. You just needed to find someone worthy of your readiness. She kissed him then, deep and certain, pouring 3 years of healing and hope and hard-won joy into the gesture. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless and laughing, she said, yes. Let's find a place with windows for Duchess and space for both our futures. Yeah. Yeah. Let's build something beautiful. And there, on a Brooklyn Street corner under autumn stars, Simone Clark, survivor, poet, sister, lover, woman rebuilt, claimed the ending she'd written for herself. Not perfect, but honest. Not without scars, but beautiful at the seams. The bride had turned around, and everything had changed. But this time, Simone was the one choosing her own path. And she was choosing love, the kind that showed up, that stayed, that chose her first and kept choosing her every single day. What does true forgiveness mean to you? Is it about letting go for your own peace, or can healing happen while still holding space for the hurt? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more emotional journeys that remind us healing is possible, even from the deepest betrayals. Thanks for experiencing this journey with me. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear it.